Cool. So, welcome everybody. I took quite a risk when I was submitting the presentation. I think I'm the only one or one of two guys in this whole conference who will have a non-technical speech. Plus, I have this talk right after the lunch, so I think there is not much more worst preconditions to make a talk. So I will try to make my best to inspire you today. Without further, what I would like to open this speech with are three problems, which I would like to introduce you. And what I will be discussing is basically how can we change something, how the innovation can be made, and what is the general problem with innovations, what we see at the moment. So the first general problem, if you look at all the startup scene, if you look at a lot of people, you will see that most of the people basically think that if you have a great idea, that means immediately you will really make an impact. But for all people don't see the idea, to have a great idea is actually the very first beginning of the whole innovation. And to have a good idea basically is not enough. So if you see all these startups growing up and then fast coming down, the problem is they have a great idea, but they mostly fail in the later phases. The second problem, I don't know if you are an engineer or not, maybe we do a short assessment first. How many of you guys are engineers, so you have a technical background? Right, so most of us. I'm engineer as well, but you're engineers as well. We are studied people. I think all of us are quite intelligent. We are solving complex problems. But the issue, what I see and what I also see in my environment, to be really intelligent or good at something doesn't immediately mean you are able to convince or inspire the environment around you with your idea. So what is the problem? I call it problem with geniuses, and there is actually a great book with a chapter explaining that a lot of really smart people are struggling to being happy or successful in their lives because they are very intelligent, they have great ideas, they can solve some problem, but because they have a lack of some emotional competency, or they maybe can't communicate well, they are just failing to bring their ideas into the world. And there is the third problem with change in general. If you look at change initiatives at the moment, how many of you guys are working in a company which is in kind of agile transformation at the moment? Right, so I think it's like 30% maybe. And what we also see that most of the change initiatives fail because there is a general approach problem how companies think that the change will work. Normally what they see is a structure, they see people as resources, maybe with some titles, and they are strongly hoping when we will give people maybe higher salary, or we have them new title, or we make some external motivation, it will change. But in the reality, any organization is nothing else as a group of human. And human is something which is very hard to change because people by nature do not want to change. So the question is, it's very hard to convince or change a single person. And if you have now the mission to change the whole organization, the complexity of the change is enormously higher. So the thing is, if you really want to make a sustainable change, not only like make a aesthetical change, you need to look at the whole organization as a living organism. You have to look more what people think, what people like, what people dislike, and you need somehow to create the inner motivation. So what's the difference between inner and external motivation? If you offer somebody like a salary increase, what you are basically doing, you are motivating him with some external motivation, which might work for a certain time, but at the end, he gets back to his old behavior because the motivation was only for a short period of time. If you work with the inner motivation, that means I'm convinced that what I do is the right thing. That means it's more sustainable, and once I get the inner motivation, it will last, well, maybe not forever, but definitely for a long time. So what I wanted to say with that, it's not only about great idea, it's not only about bringing something new to your projects, to your technology stack, to your methods. It's basically the way how you approach the change in your team, in your organization, what really brings the idea to a successful reality. And that's actually why we have created the company, ableneo. What we basically set ourselves to a vision is that we want to really be able to change. We want to transform engineers to be a change agent, and we want to help our customers to be more successful in their change. My name is Gregor, I'm the CEO of this company, and I would like to inspire you today how we're actually approaching this problem to be more successful. So what we did as a first step, we have been trying to search for patterns of projects or change initiatives where actually the change succeeded. And what we have came up with are three basic principles. The first is theory of systems. So how many of you guys actually worked or is working in a Scrum project? Right, so if you work in a Scrum project, you also should know theory of systems, because theory of systems is basically the intelligence, the logic behind Scrum. So if you don't know it, just Google it, theory of systems or systemics. That's basically the science behind Scrum. Then we have a second approach, which is called lean change management. It's kind of change framework, but very simple, made in a gamificated view. So basically anybody can take it, and it has very simple steps if you want to approach change. And there is a third very important skill which you should know. You should be matter expert on the change you want to introduce. So if you have an idea, I want to introduce, let's say for instance, AngularJS instead of JSP, you should really have the right skills to understand Angular and really to be able to implement the right solution. So understand the systems, have some basic change process in your mind, and be expert or at least professional at certain level in the area you want to implement. Let's get right to that. So what we start with, let's imagine you have a great idea, you woke up. I take an example, you are in an enterprise project, you're working with Liferay 6.2, and you are absolutely convinced we have to go to DXP 7.2 after the talk you heard yesterday, right? So what's the very first thing what you would do? Any idea? It's quite hard with the headphones, right, to speak and hear. Okay, so what I would do normally, I'm absolutely convinced I heard a great speech, it's absolutely great, there is no doubt it can't work. What I would do, I will go to my boss and tell him, look, I was at this conference, I heard Brian Chan, great product, great stuff, we have to do that, right? 90% of people approach the change, approach the innovation like this. The problem is what they are saying is what? So they are saying just arguments. They are saying opinion, I think it's great, I heard it's perfect, we have to do that. The general problem with this approach is it's quite hard to convince somebody, because you are not telling him why you should do that. You are only trying to push your arguments that he has to do that. So the first thing when you start by inspiring somebody is stop only telling what you want to do, but look at it from different point of view and try to ask why we should do that, right? Try to find the right problem, try to identify the purpose of the innovation you have, and take it from different side. Why is that important? If you understand a bit how the brain works, you have three main parts. There is this reptilic part, which we had from dinosaurs. Then there is this limbic system, and on the very top you have neocortex. And the neocortex basically is responsible for logical questions, for basically the intelligence. That means if you get an opinion, like I'm saying what we should do and it's great, your neocortex basically takes this information, and based on your previous experience, it will tell you, yes, it's a good idea, or no, it's a bad idea. So the problem is, if you are telling what, you are only telling arguments, and it depends on the previous experience of that person, if he comes out with yes, good idea, or no, bad idea. What you should do if you start with why, you are basically talking to the limbic system. And limbic system is the part of the brain which is responsible for your feelings. So if, I don't know, anybody like hurt your emotions or tells something good or bad, the signal which is being triggered, it's coming from the limbic system. And the problem or the good thing with why, you are actually trying to start some emotion by the person, right? So if you, let's say a concrete example, if I just say we have to upgrade to DXP first, you are not really triggering any emotion, you are not really pointing out to any problem, you are just telling your opinion. But if you start with a concrete problem like, look, I got continuous feedback from the redaction, they are really telling me bad things, I feel bad as an IT guy that I'm not delivering the product they want, or we have a problem to hire new people because our product requires very specific skill set. We can't find people on the market, thus we cannot scale. Or our engineering process is too slow, we are not delivering. Maybe somebody will not even understand this, but at least I'm trying to describe the problem. I'm trying to help the person understand the purpose, why I actually think what I'm proposing makes sense. Because we have a problem, there is a purpose solving that, and then I have a solution. So what I wanted to say, if you have an idea, not always starts with what, not only start arguing why you have a great idea, but think first why. And if you are guys interested in this, it's not my idea, there is a great guy called Simon Sinek who wrote the book. He actually has YouTube videos and quite lot of materials when he is explaining why it is important to start with why and not with what. And actually he is applying this for companies. So he's helping companies to have a good vision and to be more successful in attracting new talents and new customers, because if you present your value and your purpose, not your product first, then you are basically more successful. The second point I would like to talk is the validation, right? So in the first point, we kind of rephrased the pitch. We kind of learned how to propose the idea to somebody. And normally what you would do as a second step is straight away do it. But before we start changing something, we should prepare ourselves for the change. And what that means, we have like 3 simple steps. The first is you should get to know the environment you are in, right? So let's take the example. You are working in the waterfall project and you get an idea, guys, maybe we should try agile way of working. So you look at the organizational structure and you will see something like this, roles, connections, whatever, that's all nice, but it's not the reality. The reality looks something like this. So you have a lot of connections, you have people who from some reason want to play against you, you have people who want to play with you. So what I wanted to say with that, if you want to change something in your organization, you have to very good understand the environment, the people, the relations, the motivations, etc. What can help you with that is to think about your environment in kind of metrics. So think about the people you have in your team. You have your product owner, you have your team members, maybe you have some testers, maybe you have some, I don't know, CTO, CIO, and try to divide all these people into 4 groups. There are like 2 axes. In one is the influence. So the more influence the person has, the higher it is in these quadrants. And on the other side, the x-axis is basically showing how interested this person is or how available this person is, right? If you do this, what you came up with in the right top corner, you will have people who are quite good influencers, so they have a great power, they can stop or support you, and they are very interested. So for me, if I would introduce Scrum, for instance, in a team, PO would be definitely there. Or maybe the head of development or head of the department will be definitely there. Then you have people who maybe have less or more power, less or more influence. The thing is that you will make like a mental practice in your head, like, okay, if I start, who I might be facing with? There is a Peter who is a total distractor. There is maybe Julie who likes innovations. There is my boss who is very oriented on numbers and on profit, and I have to keep him happy. If he will come to me and asks me, what are you doing, why are you changing some stuff, and where is the value behind, I have to be able to tell him what are we doing. So this matrix can help you to think about the people you have in your environment and try to somehow understand who has a power, who has motivation, who can support you, who can stop you. And this matrix can also then help you to think about the communication strategy. Right? So the people you will have in the top right, these key stakeholders, it's quite important. You will keep them satisfied, happy, and you should keep them close. That means, for instance, you will show them on a weekly basis, like a short report, look, boss, this is where we are. This is what we improved, right? Then you might have people who are also important, but they are not that much interested in what you do. So the idea is basically just keep them happy. Maybe if you send them the weekly report, they will say like spam, right? But maybe you should send them like a monthly report or talk to them shortly. I mean, it's up to you. The goal is to think about environment, the people, and how can they support or distract you. The second very important thing before you actually start changing something is to think about how are we going to measure the success, right? So you have your idea. Let's say your idea is to go to DXP or to go to Angular or whatever else. You identified some reason, and now the question is, once we are over, once the migration is over, once we are agile, once we have a new process, how are you going to be able to measure that? This is quite tricky and it will maybe take some time, but it's actually one of the key elements of your success. Because the problem is if you do not define like the measurement and you will just start straight away, and let's say the CEO will come to you after 1 month and ask you, okay, show me what is better or worse. It's often not enough to just say, I have a feeling it's better. He will stop you straight away. So basically why it's important to think about measurements is that you will all the time know if what you are doing is helping you or not. You have basically chosen a path. We should be agile, so we go this direction, and this measurable change or measurable goal should tell you all the time, are we on the right track or even not? And maybe it will show you you are not on the right track, but it's good to know after 1 week as at the end, right? So in order to fix this, we have a tool which we call minimal detectable change. And what is that basically? It's the thing you will measure which should tell you if you are on the good or on the bad path, right? So I have some examples. Let's say you are introducing some new process. So for instance, you might measure duration of a certain process. Maybe your requirements engineering process is taking too long. So why just say, okay, we need now, in average, for the analysis phase, 3 months. Our goal is to shorten it to 50%. And if you're using Jira or any other tool, you can very easily measure, I don't know, ticket status, whatever, you find it, it's easy measurable. The second, quantity, right? So let's, for example, you have identified a problem, guys, we have large amount of bugs. So you decided to introduce pair programming or some kind of testing, right? You know today that you have 50% of your sprint you invest into bug fixing. You can easily say, guys, after 3 months, we should go to 20%, right? So quantity could be also measurable element. Another point is quality. So this could be also like amount of bugs or even customer feedback. So if for you it's important not to have like a number, but maybe just the feedback, that's also quite good. I know if you are collecting feedback from the customers, from the team, what we have, for instance, in the Scrum projects, we call it Team Radar. And at the end of each sprint, we are just asking the team how they measure fan factor, how they measure how good is the sprint input or sprint output. And they can even range it from 1 to 5. We ask this in each retrospective. So you can use this as a measurable change. You can say, in average, our teams are ranking the fan factor 1 from 5. Our goal is to get to 4, for instance, right? And also, what is quite interesting, you can also use behavior as a measurable change. For instance, we had one team, and the problem was they were absolutely not proactive. They were sitting there waiting until the work will come. So what our goal was basically to introduce proactivity in this team. And what we have been measuring or observing is the behavior of the team. And at the end, what our goal was that each team member will proactively pick the tasks and assign to them, right? This is something which it will be hard to put on the numbers, but if you think it makes sense and is important for your boss, you can also pick like some behavior kind of metrics, if it makes sense for you. Good, so the third thing before we start actually experimenting is we call it set the stage. So at some point you will start doing something, but before you start that, let's say you should think about in which team, in which environment I'm going to start the new technology or the new process. So what is working very good if you are introducing something new is not to tell people from tomorrow you will be in the new pilot project, but you should invite them. What we did in some companies, we said, look guys, we will test a new way of working in 3 months. Anybody of you is invited. We need 5 competencies. We need UX, we need front end, we need back end, we need some tester. We don't say Carl, Peter, and Johan will join us. We said we need 5 competencies. Anybody in the company can apply for the position, and you will be part of the pilot team. And it's a great effect because the people, only those who are motivated will join, plus maybe you will explore talents which you just overseen in the past. The second thing is to pick the right project to test your idea. I mean, if you have figured out that our biggest problem is we do not have very proactive team members, maybe you should pick the project where this problem is the biggest to really see the impact as soon as possible. And the third thing is like to think about the budget. Maybe if you will be introducing something new, you will not need any extra money, but in many cases, if you decide we want to test something new, you will need some additional money to actually make it. So just don't forget, if you will come with this proposal to your boss or to your CEO, always think about what we have to invest and what it will bring at the end of the day. Good. And the very last point we have, or the third point we have, is experiment. So to recap it, we have learned how we can make a good change pitch. We have prepared ourselves. We have defined the measurable change. We prepared the pilot project, or let's call it an experiment environment, and now we can experiment. Experiment is something which might sound in a lot of companies very pejorative, very negative, or very like hipster style. Actually, experiment is a very sophisticated element. If you know this, it's called Canavan framework. And what's that is like very old, I think it's like 20, 30 years old concept, which is trying to divide or explain how can you solve different type of problems. And it is showing like there are 4 types of problems. You have some easy, and then you have some complicated and complex problems. Can anybody of you explain me the difference between complicated and complex? Any idea? It's still hard with headphones, right? Okay. So complicated problems are basically those who require quite a lot of time to fix them, but if you analyze them and split into small pieces, and you have the knowledge for that, it's quite predictable how to solve them. The complex problems are those where you do not even know the solution up front, because you make it for the first time, or you have a new technology or new customer, just environment where you are, it's so unknown that even having the best experts, you just can't predict where we will land. That means complex type of problems require different approach. And they do require approach where you try to actually do something or test something, then very fast sense how it worked, good or bad, and based on that adapt your way of working. If it sounds familiar, it's basically Scrum. So I heard 1 year ago a great description of Scrum, and it says that Scrum is the ultimate framework for turning complex problems into complicated. And actually it is like that, because if you look what's the biggest added value for Scrum, what it really can, it's take like one bunch of unknown problem and continuously try to split it into smaller pieces, try to solve them in a very time-boxed environment, and use the knowledge after each sprint to be better in the next sprint. So experiment is actually the same. You need to test stuff in order to be better in knowing what to do next. If you imagine this experiment, let's say we have a Scrum team, let's say that the red graphics is like behavior or development of a normal team which is not applying Scrum. So the team has some behavior, some practices, they will just continue in their normal path, right? They will come to the office, etc. Let's imagine if you will start applying Scrum or agile practices to them, you will slowly change their behavior and you will slowly change the way how they work. So what this graphics is basically showing is your goal should be to influence the team with a small changes, small experience, small experiments, and see that their behavior is basically going in different direction as if you wouldn't do anything. And the delta between the red normal path and the green new path is your minimal detectable change. And that's why you should actually measure this measurable change as soon as possible to see this what we are doing. It is bringing us to the good way or to the bad way. I give you a concrete example of an experiment. So this is like for one team where we set ourselves 3 concrete goals. We said to ourselves, we want to be better in giving commitment, we want to have better transparency, and we want to be able to have better scope definition. What we did for the first goal, we have introduced effort estimations. Before it was like, this is like our guess what we can do, but we have introduced effort estimation. And as you can see, at the beginning of the project, there were no effort estimates at all. After first sprint, what we have been able is to see, okay, our estimation and reality has a deviation over 60%. And after each sprint, we have been able to improve these metrics and see how the effort skill set or estimation skill set is going up. Good, I have 1 minute 47 seconds to wrap it up. What I wanted basically to inspire you with today is once you have a great idea and you want to be more successful in actually bringing that to reality, always try to inspire people, not only tell them your opinion. Always try to prepare yourself, know the people, set the measurable change, pick the right project, then just experiment, and at the end, scale it and improve it. Thank you very much, and I think I should tell you if you like or dislike to have this event application where you can give the feedback, and we have 1 minute, 9 seconds for Q&A if you have any. Thank you very much.